You're listening to Elevate Ethics, a podcast from Ethical Reasoning and Action at James Madison University. In this episode, you'll meet Dr. R. Edward Freeman, University Professor at the University of Virginia's Darden School of Business. Dr. Freeman is joined by Ethical Reasoning and Actions Director, Dr. Christian Early, and JMU College of Business Professor, Dr. Roxanne Ross. They'll discuss business ethics, stakeholder theory, and the importance of recognizing the interconnectedness of stakeholder interests. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Elevate Ethics. So with us today, we have Dr. R. Edward Freeman. Tell us a little bit about what you do at UVA.
Well, I've been at UVA for 38 years. I teach ethics and sometimes leadership and sometimes strategy and sometimes philosophy and at the graduate business school at the Darden School.
And then Dr. Christian Early is also here.
Yeah, hi. My name is Christian Early. I direct Ethical Reasoning and Action here at JMU. We do this lecture series, Elevate Ethics, for which later on Dr. Freeman will give a public lecture.
And Dr. Roxanne Ross.
Hi. Yeah, so I am an assistant professor of management in the College of Business here. My areas are in behavioral business ethics and leadership, and I teach ethics in our MBA program as well as organizational behavior.
Thank you all for being here. As originator of stakeholder theory, and it's had an incredible influence on the fields of business ethics and management as well as management practice. Can you give us a brief description of what stakeholder theory is and what issues it seeks to resolve?
The stakeholder idea is really the simplest idea in the world. It says that businesses have always and will always create and sometimes destroy value for customers, suppliers, employees, communities, and people with money, investors or financiers. Stakeholder theory is just a way to say there are a lot of issues and questions around how that works, and the people doing work on stakeholder theory, academics really all over the world, think about those things. They think about business in stakeholder terms. I was trained as a philosopher, didn't know anything about business, and just tried to figure it out. And it seemed to me very plain and common sense that businesses and executives created value for stakeholders. I still think that's true. I still think it's common sense and completely obvious. And I never understood why this seemed to be a kind of radical or different point of view.
Yeah, so I'm curious a little bit more like where you got the inspiration for that idea. It sounds like it was something that you were like, well, this seems almost plain. But
I didn't.
Kind of isn't in a way, I think.
Yeah, I didn't invent the idea. The idea has been around since the 60s. I figured out where it came from. It came from the Stanford Research Institute, and it came from a man named Eric Rinman, who was a organization theorist in Sweden and was really the father of industrial democracy. I get a lot of credit for this, which I don't deserve, because I wrote a book in the 80s that tried to say, if you took this idea seriously, what would companies look like? People had taken the stakeholder idea as a way of sort of organizing trends in the environment, et cetera. And they didn't really push it down into how do you make decisions. If what companies really do is create value for stakeholders, then let's talk about how you organize to do that, how you make decisions to do that. But I didn't invent this. I once said I was the only person to have written about stakeholder theory who did not claim to have invented it.
So what do you think in terms of, you said if we took the idea of stakeholder theory seriously, what would a company look like? What would a company look like if they took it seriously, and what would a company look like if they didn't?
But if you don't take it seriously, what it looks like, you're making a bunch of trade-offs and you only care about the money.
Yeah.
If you take it seriously, you realize, hey, the money's important, but if I don't have customers, what can I do? I had a former congressman say to me recently at a reasonably unpleasant dinner, well, Ed, suppose I only care about the money. And I said, okay, let's suppose you only care about the money. I looked him right in the eye and said, how are you going to make it? I said, you better have customers who want your product that makes their lives better. You need suppliers who want to make you better because they're in the same situation with you as you are with their customers, with your customers. You need employees who are going to show up every day for more than just a check. You need communities who at least don't want to run you out because you've done something horrible. If you do those things and you get lucky, you might make money. So this idea that it's the money or stakeholders is just it's a false choice.
Yeah. So you view those two things as synonymous,
They're not synonymous, but they
like jointly
they go
influencing
together.
one another.
They go together.
Yeah.
The most powerful word in the English language is and. It's not stakeholders or shareholders. It's stakeholders and shareholders. It's not I got to have a purpose or I got to be profitable. It's I got to have purpose and profits. So the and here is an incredibly powerful thing. And as business people and economists and business school professors love trade-offs.
Yeah.
I hate trade-offs. I think they're intellectually lazy. We need to use our imagination to find the and here. And maybe I'm just greedy. Maybe that's what it is. But I want a company that has a sense of purpose, trying to do something.
Yeah.
And of course, they got to make money. If you don't make money, you can't exist.
Right.
So I think there's a number of these sort of false dichotomies that we pay attention to, and that we teach our students that we really shouldn't.
Yeah, it does seem like students tend to come into the classroom with that belief kind of already built in, even at lower levels.
Yeah. Look, there's a story about business in society that business is about the money, and it's about profits. Money and profits are somehow morally questionable, and business people are greedy little bastards out trying to do each other in, trying to outcompete each other. That's not how business actually works.
Yeah.
Business works because people can cooperate together to do something that no one of them can do alone. And it works because our desire to create for others, to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. Now sometimes this desire goes bad. I'm not arguing that. But business has brought more people out of poverty than any other institution around. And it doesn't get credit for the good stuff. It gets ample credit for the bad stuff, and it should, but it needs to get credit for the good stuff. If I were to walk into your class and say, hey, we got an ethics issue we really have to talk about. It's really important. Not a soul in there will think, somebody must have invented something really cool that makes our lives better. They will only think that something bad has happened.
Yeah.
And that's, that's too bad.
Ed, what I like about what you're saying is that it seems that on the one hand, if we were being realistic, that all that there is really the money aspect. But what you're saying is, if we think about it hard enough, you can't stop at just the money. It has to be money and people and customers and all sorts of other things.
Yeah. I mean, that seems. I grew up poor on a farm, and money was really important. But you didn't make any money if you didn't sell any crops, and you didn't have customers, and you didn't have people to work the fields and do all this kind of stuff. So and profits itself is a lagged variable. How much money I make is dependent on how I manage these stakeholder relationships. And now if I don't manage them very well, guess what? Profits goes down. In other words, in the words of my Taekwondo instructor when watching me punch or kick, too late. You want to know when you're screwing up. Yeah. You want to know when customers or finding somebody else's product more attractive so you can change. You want to know when employees feel like, gee, they're not being paid enough, or the working conditions aren't great, or there's no meaning in what they're doing. So you can correct that, because you can't make profits if you don't do that, or you can't make them for long. Now, big organizations are hard to kill. So, you can go on and really maybe just care about shareholders, or you think that's the real purpose of a business. But it's really hard to be great if all you're trying to do is make money.
So there is this sort of temptation to have a reductionistic mindset about how to think about business. And I think what you're proposing is that you can't actually reduce everything to one thing, money. It doesn't work that way.
Well, I mean, you can do it. It just doesn't. There's a better way to do it.
Yeah.
What I would say is that stakeholder theory is about making business better. It's not about being woke or anything like that. It's just about how to make business better.
Yeah.
I think we need to be the generation that makes business better. And the good news is this is happening all over the world. People are taking the stakeholder idea seriously, not for anything I've done, but they're getting the message that you want to build a great company. You better see how customers, suppliers, employees, communities, and investors can get going in the same direction. People say, well, don't those groups conflict? Yes, of course they do. So the metaphor I like to think about is, how do you get those groups harmonized? Because in music, the notes are different, but when they're in harmony, they sound good. So sure, customers want lower prices and more features. Employees might want more pay or meaningful work. And what you have to do is use your imagination to figure out how you get those things going in the same direction. It's easy to say, but it's hard to do.
Yeah.
And great companies have figured out how to do it. It's easier to do when you're starting a business. This idea that you can't, if all you've been doing is grinding out shareholder value for a long time, and now you think, oh, I need a purpose that's different than that.
Yeah.
That's a hard change project. So easier to do when you start a business, but not impossible to do from a large business, because it's a little bit like the Molière character who gets pissed off because he has to learn prose. And then he realizes he's already speaking prose. Companies are already engaging with their stakeholders. They just may be doing it badly.
Right.
So once you adopt this stakeholder vocabulary, it helps you figure out how to engage with them better, how to be better with your customers and your employees, and how to get those things going together. So it's a change really in the vocabulary of business that tries to answer, Roxy, really your first question about what problems you're trying to solve. I think there are three. One is, how do we understand business or value creation and trade in a time where there's very little certainty? There's a lot of complexity. There's very little certainty in the world, and where the dominant way of understanding business has been through understanding bureaucracy. Bureaucracy works fine where there's stability, where there's not much uncertainty. Where there's uncertainty, it doesn't work very well, because you have to move much faster than those organizations can. It addresses the problem of, how do we understand the ethics of capitalism? If you ask the American people what do they expect of business, what they say overwhelmingly is they expect them to pay attention to their stakeholders. That's certainly there. And yet we have this sort of, skepticism that business can do something for good. And it also tries to address the idea, what should we teach in business schools? I take that very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think sometimes that we just stop teaching the wrong stuff.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
we'd be much
Make it a
better
lot
off.
easier.
whether we teach stakeholder theory or not. Let's just stop teaching the stuff that's wrong.
Right.
Then we'll be better off.
You said that people expect businesses to care for
Yeah.
stakeholders, or they hope for businesses to care?
If you ask them what you expect of businesses, as Just Capital, which is an NGO that sort of measures how companies are doing with their stakeholder relationships. So they've done surveys of what people want businesses to do and what they expect them to do. The answer is they divide it up into jobs for fair pay for employees, products and services that work,
Yeah.
Taking care of the environment, being good citizens of the community, et cetera. Of course, you have to make money to make that work. That's pretty much true in the surveys I've seen all over the world.
That's interesting.
And that's pretty much what most businesses do. But we have this story that businesses, I call it the business sucks story, that businesses are sort of morally questionable.
Yeah.
And that profits are bad. If profits are bad, making red blood cells must be bad. I gotta make red blood cells to live.
To survive, yeah.
Businesses have to make profits to live. It doesn't follow that either the purpose of my life is to make red blood cells,
Yeah.
or that the purpose of a business is to make profits. Those are just what philosophers would call category mistakes. And they're full of that.
Well, and then another like narrative that I think kind of connects with this that you were kind of touching on a little bit earlier, which is like sometimes when I talk to students about business ethics, the idea is that it's shareholder wealth creation. That's like the only purpose of what like we're supposed to be doing in a corporation, or what people do.
Says who?
Well, it says their beliefs. Right, it's like the stories that people like believe to be true, and that pro-social things or things that may seem pro-social or moral or caring for other stakeholders besides shareholders is sort of extra, maybe not the main show or the main focus, but would be nice to have, or maybe shouldn't be featured at all. And what you're saying, it sounds like, is that all those things kind of are connected. Like you can't disconnect them. That's
no,
a false,
you can't. I mean,
a false dichotomy as well.
So people attribute to Milton Friedman the idea that the only purpose of a firm is to maximize profits. No. First of all, Friedman saw that as an ethical obligation. So he just juxtaposes. He just juxtaposes people who say ethics is important. Friedman didn't think it was. Well, that's not true. He did think it was. He said, maximize profit subject to ethical custom and law.
Yeah.
Now,
right.
I would differ with him in terms of what ethical custom and law entail, but nonetheless, ethics is there. There's nowhere in which you can be amoral here. Ethics is in almost every business decision you make. It's in most of the decisions we make in our lives. So there's no place to hide from it. That's one of the things that we teach that's wrong, is that economics is this sort of empirical positive theory, and there's no ethics anywhere in it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's one of the things we need to stop
Right.
doing. Adam Smith certainly didn't do that. Adam Smith wrote a book called Theory of Moral Sentiments, in which he talks about how all of our human relationships are kind of based in ethics, etc. And he wrote that book in Wealth of Nations. He revised them both throughout his entire life. He saw them as going together, not as being one's about business and one's about ethics.
Yeah.
But we got this story. I tell people I teach business ethics, oxymoron, two words you put them together, contradiction.
Right.
I went to Duke. I used to say Duke football, jumbo shrimp. There are all kinds
Jumbo shrimp.
Jumbo shrimp, Or, gee, you teach business ethics. I didn't know business had any. Or, must be a short course.
Right.
Or I was in a bar in Copenhagen with people, and somebody asked me what I did, and I said I taught business ethics, and said, must be, that's a theoretical subject, isn't it? And that's the problem. When you see these things as not going together, you just miss a whole bunch of stuff that goes on in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I've even heard that thinking about ethical issues in businesses is not in like the field of management, or it's not part of this field.
Oh,
right?
yeah, no, I've
like that's that's
for
something
a
else.
long time.
You don't know what that is.
Go to a philosophy department.
Yeah, right.
You don't belong.
But it doesn't belong
this.
here in
Yeah,
the college
that's right.
business.
Now, in business, of course, there's a very long tradition of business thinkers, primarily executives. Think about this. If you go back to Chester Barnard in 1938, he writes a book called The Function of the Executive. And he writes all about ethics and how ethical judgment is incredibly important. If you go back even further to the founding papers of a group in India called the Tata Group, you'll see the stakeholder idea right there.
Wow.
And you see that in many of the histories of businesses. Have they gotten it all right all the time? No, of course not. We don't get everything right. There's some, we tend to think of business as sinners for the most part, and occasionally you'll find somebody who's a saint. And so we got to make them, got to lift them up,
Here's your Patagonia.
Patagonia, Whole Foods, the whole thing. And of course, Oscar Wilde put it best. He said, every saint's got a past, every sinner's got a future. We need to see business people and businesses as kind of profoundly human. We're not one-dimensional maximizers of our short-term self-interest. That's another thing we need to stop teaching. Anybody who's ever had a child or been in love knows this. We're capable of nasty stuff, and we're capable of incredible acts of love and kindness. Why is that different in business than it is in the rest of our lives? We don't walk in the door and say, oh, excuse me, can I leave my values here? I'll go be a greedy little bastard for 8 hours, but I'll pick them up
And then
on the
I'll
way
go back,
home.
right, yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
Yes.
So, Ed, thinking about past and future, for you, stakeholder theory, you said you wrote something about it in the 1980s. It's been around before that. But that idea has had 40, 45 years and more. What would you say is one thing that you've discovered about it that you didn't think about it back then, but you sort of learned over the past 40, 45 years?
That's a good question. I think I would have said, and most people would, when they hear stakeholder theory, what they say is, oh, there's more than shareholders, right? And that's true. There are, and I think that's an important part of stakeholder theory. But the most important part is the fact that stakeholder interests are interconnected. And if you don't understand that interconnection, how does, for instance, here at JMU, how does dealing with students affect how you deal with faculty? How do both of those things affect how you deal with alums? How do those three things affect how you deal with the community here? And it's understanding the interconnections here that's hard. People get in business, for the most part, they get the idea, they might not like the word, but they get the idea that they got to deal with stakeholders. I can't think of a company that doesn't deal with its customers or suppliers or employees or even its communities, and certainly its investors. They get that. But they don't always get that if you think about these things together, you can find ways to create even more value. Think for a minute about Walmart. What did Walmart do in the 80s? They figured out how they could use technology to connect customers and suppliers and employees, and they gave us this whole idea that you could look at supply chains together. Well, supply chains are just ways to integrate multiple stakeholders. And so thinking about those things, how they go together, I knew that when I wrote this old book, but I didn't understand how important it was. You know? I think there was just one more thing. I think the other thing I didn't understand was how important creative imagination is. I listened to a guy who was CEO of a chemical company in the 90s, and they got tired of being the dirtiest company on earth, so they're gonna clean up their company. And they set these realistic goals, by this date we're gonna be here at this, and another date we're gonna be here, another date we're gonna be here, and this company's done a lot to that. So he's going around telling the people at the facilities that, we're gonna clean up, and here's the plan. One facility he goes to, the engineers come up to him and say, we can't meet this first interim target. This plant equipment's too old, this process is too dirty, we can't do it. So he says, okay, we'll have to close the plant. We're serious about this. You want to make a trade-off? Employees on the one hand, environment, community on the other hand. Environment wins, employees lose. A few weeks go by, engineers come back. A miracle has occurred. We figured out how to do it. And the CEO says, he told the story, he said, so I said, the CEO says, how much is it going to cost? He's thinking $10, $20 million, big company. And the engineer said, well, actually, we're kind of embarrassed that if we do it this new way, we're going to save money. Now, what's going on here? When trade-offs become unacceptable, we kick into gear the only real thing we got, our creative imagination, to figure out how to dissolve the trade-off, how to find the and here, how to find the win-wins. I had inclinations of that back in the late 70s, early 80s when I was sort of developing my version of this, but I didn't understand how important the interconnection was, nor how important creative imagination was.
And then I have one last question, and that is, what are you working on now?
I just finished a book about a multi-stakeholder initiative in Indonesia that looked at had a business family there, the Tahiyas, one was an alum of Darden, who wanted to do something for the community. So they took on dengue fever. Dengue fever is a horrible thing. And they put together a multi-stakeholder partnership with the Gates Foundation and Gajah Mada University and their foundation, their family foundation. Took them 10 years. They funded it all themselves. And at the end of 10 years, they had figured out how to reduce the incidence of dengue fever by 75%.
Oh my goodness.
And how to reduce hospitalization by 85%. Now that saved kids' lives.
Wow.
And I had really nothing to do with any of this. I just wrote the story.
Yeah.
And it's a really phenomenal story. It involves putting a bacteria inside a mosquito somehow, and then releasing several 100 million mosquitoes in an area. And that's a hard thing too, because people in places like in Indonesia don't see mosquitoes as friendly pets.
Right.
So it was a massive stakeholder engagement project, and the family was just, the results were published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and hopefully those projects are being replicated around the world now in places where there's dengue fever. Yeah. The other thing I'm working on, I have fantasy of writing a book called Philosophy and Stakeholder Theory, trying to go back to some philosophical ideas that have always made sense to me and try and understand how they have influenced what I've written about stakeholder theory.
Beautiful.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Elevate Ethics, a podcast dedicated to elevating the conversation around ethics and ethical reasoning in our personal, professional, and civic lives. Make sure you subscribe to hear more about the ongoing collaborative efforts to elevate ethics here at James Madison University. To learn more about ethical reasoning in action, visit jmu.edu/ethicalreasoning.